There we go. Okay, so this is the implementation session meeting for Collect, and we're starting off with open questions. So go ahead, Garima.
So I was reading Ira Glass's quotes that you have put in there, and so the message that I'm getting from him is that if you have a project in mind, just jump, just basically start doing it.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So that's actually good to know because we sit and we actually think about it so much. I think that's not a bad message.
Yeah. No, it absolutely is. And this is what we talked about is that with your coaching offer, you've been doing coaching with people already. So you've already taken that leap. And
Right.
when we talked, you were saying that you have a whole bunch of, there's like curriculum you want to make and like it needs to be this whole big thing. And I was like, no, no, let's just start with the simplest possible thing you can come up with. You know, you have had enough experience to know what is effective up to a point. So let's just decide and this is, what you're doing right now, Garima, is not that dissimilar from Jessica in the sense that it's totally different topics. You're both very experienced in your area. You know what you're doing. You've talked to people and helped people with this before, but you haven't quite put it together into a package yet that is something you know you can stand behind. And I really want to encourage both of you to go to treat this very MVP, very minimum viable product. What is the simplest possible way to do this? And for both of you, with your road mapping, one of your jobs one of your jobs with road mapping is to get 3 clients and work with them for both of you. So if you want to meet up with each other for accountability, that's not a bad idea, right? Because it is scary to do when you don't have all your ducks in a row and you don't know what all the things are and you're not prepared for everything. But pilots are powerful, going in and saying like, I'm testing this out. I think it's going to work. I'm really confident about the basic idea, but like the details may be a little fuzzy, but I know I can do this and I'm going to be there 100% of the time. Like I am so there for this. I'm there to test. I'm there to get results, no matter what. And personally, I've run a bunch of pilots for different things. They've always been so cool and like the best. Even if like the curriculum wasn't completely finished, in some cases I was writing it as I went, like I did a pilot with a marketing course that I designed at one point. And the whole job, the brief, the thing I told people when they came in was like, I'm going to literally write this as we go. Like you will get the new lesson right before we talk about it, and I will live teach it, and then you'll go do it. And so that was what I was doing. And people knew it and they were excited. And it was the best possible cohort of that group. I mean, they all bonded together, they kept meeting together afterwards. So it's, you know, that I'm saying all this to encourage you to just be confident and be like, it's going to be cool. It's going to be fine. I know you can do this, and I know you can do this because you've done it already, you know, and defining what the outcomes are that matter to people and coming up with the language and all that kind of stuff will partly come out of just doing the work and just actually working with people.
Yes, thank you. That
Okay,
that makes sense.
great. Awesome. Okay, Bree.
Yeah, thanks. I've been enrolled in a training it seemed like a kind of subsequent training to do to my craniosacral practice. And I decided in the last few weeks that it wasn't for me and just emailed the teachers yesterday that I would be stepping away. And I got a wave of just like disappointment and frustration and panic that it was the wrong choice. Although I took my time, I felt into it, I talked to
Internally, you
people
felt this.
internally. When I realized I was going to step away, I felt so relieved and so much space. But the second I said no and got their confirmation that it was a no,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, why do I have to do that? Like, I don't want to be in that course, but now I have longing that I just lost something precious. So I just, yeah, I just
Sunk costs.
sunk
Sunk costs.
costs.
You know, this is one of those
Yeah.
things where you have invested time, energy, probably money in this course, and you had an idea that this was going to lead you to something. You realized in your logical brain, and the stuff that we're doing today for the collect phase is the perfect, place to be talking about this stuff. That this was not going to be a good fit. It was not a good use of your time. And the relief that you felt in saying no is true. That's the true relief. But then
Yeah.
there's this other part of you that's like, yeah, but what about all this that I put in? Does it not mean anything anymore? Does it not matter anymore? And the main thing to know about this, and it's a really hard lesson to learn, is the only time you have is the time that's in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, and that was why I stepped away from it, because I was like, I have something else to do with my time. Yeah. Okay. It's just good to have that reflection, because there's like, I can make myself crazy with second guessing.
Yes. And part of the process we're learning here with the Creative Focus Workshop is a really robust decision process, so that when you feel those waves of like, oh my God, what? You can actually trace back and go, this is why I did this. This is
Yeah.
the reason. These
Yeah.
reasons are still true. There's nothing else that's come up that has made these reasons not true, or, given counter evidence. And so you can ride that wave and be like, okay, it's fine. I'm going to be fine. Whereas without that, it's very hard sometimes, to do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Welcome, Jennifer. Hi.
Hi.
Anybody else have a question or something you want to bring up before we get started with collect phase stuff? Okay, great. All right, so the mission today is just to basically go through the lessons in the collect phase, answer any questions you might have. You may or may not have gotten to these yet. Totally fine either way. And talk about why we do the collect phase at all, and why we do it the way we do it in the Creative Focus Workshop. So just to roll back a little bit, if nobody's even looked, if anybody has not looked, let me put it that way, the collect phase is the first of the 4 phases of the Creative Engine. So the Creative Engine is the framework that I've developed to talk about finishing projects, any kind of projects, really. I apply it to creative projects, but it also applies equally to not particularly creative projects like, planning a big event or something like that, right? So it's the same 4 phases, and the 4 phases are collect, decide, act, and reflect. And so we're going to talk about collect today, which is the first phase, but it is a cycle, right? It goes around. And so in some ways, the beginning of the cycle you could think of it in the reflect phase, because we're all, midlife people. We have a lot of history. What we're coming into this with is understanding and reflections on stuff that's happened in the past that influences our decisions going forward. And a lot of the stuff we're doing in the collect phase, in some ways, really is reflective. It's really thinking about, why this and not that, and so on. There's also information gathering and very, very clearly collect stuff. And so the collect phase in general is where you research and where you get training and where you get preparation and you put everything together, you put all the materials together you're going to need. In the decide phase, then you figure out what's relevant out of that and what you're going to pursue. And so you're setting yourself on a track in a particular way. In the act phase, then you're implementing, you're trying to follow through on your decision. And then in the reflect phase, you are saying, well, how did that work? Was that good, bad? What did I learn? What can I do differently next time? And then you use that to go back into collect. And so you can see how that would apply to an entire, like writing an entire book or creating an entire program or whatever it is. But it also applies on like the daily basis, so like in the morning, what am I, or like maybe the day before, what are the materials I'm going to need for tomorrow? And hopefully you're deciding the day before with your top 3s what you're going to do. So you're going through decide phase. Okay, I'm going to focus on this. And then you're acting. And as you act, a lot of times you go, wait a second, I don't have enough information here, or I don't know something I'm going to need to know. And you're right back in the collect phase and pick something up. And then you're back in decide, and so you kind of are going through these different phases over and over again. I think one of the biggest values I've seen in making this explicit, because we've all done it a million times, right? It's part of just how we do things. But making it explicit as a framework highlights things that we tend to skip, and we tend to skip deciding in particular. like making a conscious decision about something. And so we're trying to force ourselves from here's a bunch of stuff to now I'm acting on stuff, but I'm not sure what, right? So that's what we're going to be going through when we go through these implementation sessions, is like how to sort of conceptually go through these things. Obviously, I'm not going to be teaching you through every single lesson individually. And another thing that came up, so I did a lesson brief today on the criteria lesson. That's posted already. So if you want to go back and look at it, it's 20 minutes. You know, I just kind of talked through criteria lessons specifically. Last week, I did the capacity lesson. Next week, I'll be doing collect. So in that lesson, interesting question came up from Lisa, who's in the CFW, who was like, okay, well, I know I'm writing my book. I don't need to decide about my book. What I need to do is I need to make sure that it's actually happening in my life. That, you know, like her husband asks a lot of her, and her father's, you know, needs her help and whatever. And so she's just like, oh, you know. So how does she make sure she reserves this time? And so we talked about how there's actually different tools that she may need to use, which are in the decide phase, that are like habits and creating templates for your week and structures that, you know, where you need to make certain kinds of decisions that then get implemented into patterns and structures for your days. And so the thing I wanted to say that reminded me of is that depending on what's going on with you, these tools will or will not be relevant at the moment. I think everything in the Creative Focus workshop will be useful at some point or another, but I don't want anybody here to feel like I need to go through this mechanically every single lesson. If it's not relevant to you right now, put it on the back burner. Don't worry about it right now. Maybe listen to it on the podcast and not do the work, you know? So if your problem right now is like, what do? I don't know how to decide. You really need to be focusing on the collect phase and then the first lesson of decide, which is the prioritization matrix. And I do want you to learn how to use it because it's really powerful. But if you know what you're doing, that's not the problem, then it's going to be more like habit building, templates for your week, you know, doing project planning, laying out the projects over time, that kind of stuff. So be aware of that. So like the danger of doing what I'm doing now with implementation sessions is making you feel like, oh my God, homework, I'm behind. Not trying to do that to you. Okay. So I'm trying to say, like, be thoughtful about what you need to finish and what you don't need to finish in terms of like doing the work in the Creative Focus workshop versus other things in your life. If you're really busy, if you don't have the time, you know, it's okay to say, all right, I don't need this right now. I'm not going to do this part right now. That said, I do think that the capacity lesson, everyone should do it. Capacity and criteria, like everybody should do this and everybody should redo it regularly because it really is like this. It is a reflective exercise. It's in collect because you're literally getting stuff together, but it's reflective. It's you thinking about where am I at right now and what's happening with me. So let me go over what the 3 C's are and how we do this. So we talked about the creative engine. The creative engine is these 4 phases. They apply to all kinds of projects, and in different projects, they look different. So that if you're doing like a historical nonfiction book, you know, the collect phase is literally research, and decide is like which things I'm going to talk about. Act is like writing the book, and reflect is like, well, what did I learn from that and what do I want to do next, right? So simple. When you're talking about the creative engine applied at a meta level to how do I do projects, that's what we're doing here, right? So the collect phase is the most important thing about the collect phase to know is this is where you answer the question, how does my reality inform what I want out of my life? So how does my reality reflect what I want out of my life and inform what I want out of my life? Instead of what we usually do, which is like, I thought of a bunch of things and therefore they need to happen. Or people say this should be possible, and so it should be possible and something's wrong with me because it's not. Or here's a planner or a system or a whatever that says I can get everything done, but I'm not getting everything done, so what's wrong with me? Like, that's what we don't want to do. We don't want that. And so what we're trying to do is create this container, again, that is your life and your reality. And you're using that then to make decisions and to build structures and to build systems that are relevant to you and reflect your reality. So that's the purpose of what we're doing, big picture, in the collect phase. Collect phase has 3 pieces to it, which all very conveniently for me start with the letter C. I did not do that on purpose, but I was very pleased to find out that that was the case. And the 3 C's are capacity, criteria, and commitments. Not only 3 C's, 3 hard C's. How lucky could a girl get? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, so capacity, again, there's a lesson brief on this already posted. But what capacity is essentially the lesson, the capacity audit is about really thinking through what are the things that are going on in your life? What does that mean for you in terms of time, in terms of your emotional capacity, in terms of your financial capacity? Do you have money to invest or allow to not come to be in order to make space for yourself? Can you use money in order to make space? Like there's all different kinds of ways that financial capacity goes into this. And also, what are your preferences about how you want to be in the world? Do you want to be doing stuff that's, creating more connections with people? Do you want to be finding ways to create solo space for yourself? There's different kinds of ways that might come into this. And so that's in the capacity audit lesson. And I got this metaphor initially from a friend who I was running a webinar with her, and she had this like image of a container, like a thing, a physical holder of stuff. And ever since then, it's like that's what really makes so much sense to me, is that when you are thinking about your capacity, it really is your capacity, which changes on the daily potentially, depending on what's going on in your life. Like you can get a phone call that kills your capacity for a week, or longer. Or you can get, like an offer of doing something in the mail that's going to, or in the email, which is going to like, pay your bills for the next 6 months. And all of a sudden you're like, holy crap, I'm good. I'm golden, right? So there's like different ways things can happen very quickly. And so I just want to make sure I'm emphasizing that. But it is the container in which you get to do everything in your life. Your capacity is what it is. Whatever it is right now, it is what it is. You can affect it by making different decisions about how you're using your time, so that if you are actually actively trying to say no to certain kinds of things that are really draining and do other things that are helpful and whatever, you can change your capacity. But right now it is what it is. It is what it is today. And the image of like using your capacity to decide what you're going to carry, what you're going to do, what fits inside that capacity, instead of saying, I have all these things, how can I get them all in there? And dropping stuff, and it's like, overflowing and whatever. I almost picture like there's a picture in the lesson of this amphora, like a Greek amphora. And it's like this picture of like you're carrying this giant jug, and that's what you can carry. You have 2 arms, you got to hold this thing, and you can't just like, juggle a bunch of other stuff at the same time. So that's the idea of capacity. And I wanted to pause there for a sec and ask, first of all, have you guys gone through this lesson? And second of all, what kinds of things came up for you? Any kind of questions you may have had as you went through it?
So I actually realized I have been tracking my time for the past couple of weeks. I mean, off and on, for typical days and typical weekends. I found that I am not lacking in time as much as I'm lacking in mental energy to focus on that particular project. So I am doing my work that I'm doing my, house chores or whatever. And then after that, I do have time, but I think I'm lacking mental focus to start.
Yeah.
So I think I need to increase my capacity in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's very common that, people are in a situation where they're like, I should be able to do all this stuff because I have the hours. But those hours, you're tapped out, you're tired, you don't, you're just not ready for it. And the kind of thing that you're doing right now, Garima, where you're trying to start something, it requires a lot of you. It's not something where you just like, once you're in the middle of this, you'll probably be able to sit down with less capacity and get some stuff done. But as you're trying to start, there's like this really enormous resistance that's going to come up there for lots of reasons, for emotional reasons, but also cognitive reasons. Like you have to think new thoughts and like do new stuff. And while nobody here is lazy, there are no lazy people here, but our brains physiologically are lazy. They look for shortcuts. They don't want to do work because work takes calories and we are physical beings that want to survive. So it's normal to have like resistance to heavy cognitive work, you know?
Okay, so maybe I'm asking too early. What's the workaround I mean,
Well, we'll work on that more
yeah.
specifically as we go along, but I think the basic thing is you need to look at the pattern of your day. So if the pattern of your day is you're using up your best cognitive energy somewhere else, doing something else, well, you need to flip it. You need to pay yourself first. You need to give yourself the chance to use your best cognitive energy on the thing that you're really interested in. And when you're a little more tired, you're doing something a little bit more routine, whatever that is. And maybe that's, I know you do your work for your job first thing in the morning. Well, it's nice to get it out of the way. But on the other hand, what if you waited 2 hours,
Right.
and did it later? So, that's the kind of thing you're going to want to look at and I think that one of the lessons that's in a deeper dive in Collect is creative conditions. And creative conditions is where you think through, how do I work best? Like what conditions, physical conditions, environmental, whatever, contribute to my best working uh, environment, and how can I make those things more available to me? So that might be a good one to go to. Yeah. And as we go along, we can definitely add more detail to that and talk about it in a more specific way. Yeah. Jessica.
Yeah, so this was such an interesting exercise for me, I have to admit. I mean, I'm a very analytical person, like equally analytical and creative, but I'm a data collector. I'm always assessing everything. I've been time tracking for probably 5 years. Um, I love this stuff. And yet the way that you kind of framed things made me look at my life very differently, which is really interesting. And in the criteria, the Collect, Define Your Criteria worksheet, when I got to the end and I was putting my criteria in order and really just thinking about kind of what I need in order to do my best work, I was really surprised that um, input and output had to be in the same place for me. So I have to be writing and I have to be learning. Those are two things that I have to be doing at all times to be me, to feel like I'm an okay, healthy human being. I have to be writing and I have to be learning. What I didn't realize until this exercise is that they have to go together.
Mm.
So when I'm only doing one or only doing the other, I start getting out of balance.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that's probably some of my resistance with kind of traditionally how coaching programs have worked and how in other programs I've been guided to create a coaching program where it's all about output, kind of pouring into people, where I need to be learning too.
Mm-hmm.
And that I can get excited about. So Garima, I'm feeling a lot of resistance about launching my coaching offer too, and it's going out into the world this week to my very tiny little list. And it's very, very scary, but I'm trying to reframe it as, okay, I'm putting this out there. I have all of this experience and knowledge and all these frameworks that I can share and really help these people with. But I'm also going to be learning about them and learning about their challenges and taking in new information that I can then, the cycle begins again to
Mm-hmm.
produce more output specifically to those challenges. So I just wanted to put that out there that these exercises seem really simple, but I'm having some major breakthroughs here.
That is fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, I try to keep them very, very simple, but they're all asking really deep questions, like really major questions. And I would, with this particular thing of coaching, I've been a teacher for 25 years, right? And I always say the first iteration of anything you teach is dog's breakfast. Like it's just a mess, and often really fun and awesome, but also just like kind of a mess. And you just kind of got to live with that. But you learn so much from every single student, client, whoever you work with. And like if you were to go back to the original thing that I put out from the Creative Focus Workshop, which was not even called that, like the very first thing I did, which is now almost 9 years ago, and look at the emails I sent out to that group, they were, I mean, there are things you'd recognize in there, but overall, it was like a completely different thing. And I did not understand the kind of stuff we're talking about today. I did not know any of this stuff. I learned this from teaching and from working with people and from hearing the kinds of this thing we're doing right now, where it's like you say something, I say something, and then you say something else, and I'm like, oh, like those things come together, and I go, oh, and it immediately, it's because of my experience, I can tie it back to other things and suddenly come up with what's really new intellectual property, like new ideas, new thoughts that can help people. So, like the 3 Cs, that's from this year. That's from like, I mean, I was starting to work on the idea of capacity as far as like maybe 18 months ago or 2 years ago. But like slotting this into this very specific, like these are the 3 lessons. I did that this year. I did that in like February, March. And this is 8 years into this program. So there's a massive amount of learning to be done for sure. And it can be frustrating.
That's
It's always,
reassuring though. It's
yeah,
really reassuring.
yeah. It's an ongoing, and that's why I say just start, because you can't be ready. You can't know ahead of time. You really can't. And that's true of any project. You really can't know. The second, the wheels hit the road, you are like, oh, this is a different road. I didn't know what was going on over here, and everything changes. Yeah. All right, great. So let's talk about criteria, which you just brought up. Criteria are the factors that contribute to success for you. So the idea with criteria is that within a domain, and so let me talk about the idea of domains briefly. Within it, domains are an area, sort of a consistent area of focus or attention or work or something like that, right? So it's a little fuzzy idea. It can be flexible. Sometimes these domains overlap quite a bit. But you might have a domain which is family relationships, like your immediate family. Like this is a domain. I want to focus on this. I want to spend time making sure I'm spending time with my children. Like in my case, my daughter's going to be leaving for college in like less than 2 years. It's insane. And I'm so unhappy about this. And so like I need to be focusing on spending time with her, and with my son who's 2 years younger. And so that's something that I've been like putting my focus on more explicitly over the last few years as I realized that my like timer was ticking down. That's a domain, right? Another domain is like, marketing efforts for my business, like writ large, right? That whole domain, like there's so many different options, different things I could be doing to promote my business, different individual products, or overall, like this is our world or whatever. Like there's so many options. And so when I'm looking at those options, I want to be comparing apples to apples. And I want to be saying like, well, what are my goals? What constitutes success in marketing my business? So one of those markers of success would be growing my audience, but more than that, growing my customers, like actually making more customers more than audience members. And so if I were to put those two on a list, I would make sure customers, like making sales to people and growing an audience of customers, would be above just growing an audience. Like I don't really care about having a giant audience. I want people who are really engaged. And so that's a way to order those things, right? That's different criteria that sound the same, but they're not the same. And other criteria might be, this needs to be something that I can do in X amount of time a week. I can't be taking on something massive because I only have this amount of time available. That's a criterion for something that is successful for me and will work for me. That there's a good relationship between the amount of effort I'm putting in and the output, that this is something that leads to dollars, that this is whatever. Like there are all kinds of different ways that I can look at the criteria within that domain. And again, to compare that to like time with my kids and my husband, that like my relationships with those people in that domain, there's nothing to do with any of those other things, right? That's all about, am I spending time just like hanging out with them, like not on a mission, like how am I doing that on a daily or every other day kind of basis, and so on. So creating a list of criteria like that. Here's the thing. You will, and I'll get you into in a sec, Elizabeth, don't worry. the first pass, as you go through this, you will not know everything and you will not remember everything. This is a very iterative process. The whole collect phase is where as you start doing stuff, again, like the second the wheels hit the road, you're gonna be like, oh, whoa, wait a second, that's not quite it. And you're gonna go back and realize you missed a criterion or you were weighting something differently. Like you said, this is more important, but actually this is more important. Or you put something on your list that you're like, I don't really care about that. Like, especially given this other thing, like that's not all that important to me. There are all kinds of things that will become visible to you as you use them. And so I encourage you to, again, objectivity, come to at it with an open mind and just kind of like brain dump whatever it is. If you're having trouble with it, there are several deeper dives that can help. Elizabeth, what was your question? You're muted.
Sorry, there it was. It's back to the question of success because it's such a riddled word, or how to say it. It's riddled with, is it meaningful to anyone else? Is this creative project that I'm doing high risk of failure? Am I willing to ride with it or devote myself to something for years that may end up with like nothing or be worthless? Not just, even though I put the time into it that I invest might be, quality time for me, but what comes of it? I mean, success, it's always both the internal and the external. And I just wanted to add another comment to that because something I've been thinking about. I don't think you said it just before. I mean, half an hour ago at the other meeting. Maybe it was something else, but there was this connection about shame, about being overloaded, having too much to do, feeling disorganized, scolding oneself, blaming oneself, and then you get into the shame. So the thing about success for me is a little bit related to this trap kind of into
Yeah, totally.
what success entails, not just my own. I might be successful at something that nobody else would find successful. Do you know what I mean? There are all these
Absolutely.
things that
Here's
I'm
what I
fumbling
want to
with
say
here.
about that. The first
So
thing I want to say is
yeah.
that the word success is very fraught, and I apologize for that. I've had a hard time coming up with something else that slots into that place. And so if you have any ideas, let me know. But like the idea is that the outcomes are what you want, that is matching up with outcomes that you want. And so you mentioned a bunch of different things that are potential success markers, but may not matter to you. And this is what we're trying to get at with criteria. So you said, maybe this really, feels really satisfying to me to work on, that it very, very much is like, fulfills my creative vision. That's a success marker that matters for sure. Other things are, it doesn't have an audience, like it doesn't land somehow. That's a danger with the project. Like that's something. And so you said that. And so what is the criterion? It has an audience. It will have an audience. Like it is likely to find an audience is a criterion. Does that matter to you or not? Right? So you get to decide if that's important or not. And in some cases, it may be important. And in other projects, it may not be important at all. And so the important thing is to like say, okay, this is something that's like swirling around my brain that like a project, to say a project is successful means these things to me personally and these things in the world. So let me list all those things out and then I'm going to put them in order. And what matters to me? What are the criteria that matter to me? And so it makes money. Do you care? Do you not care? My old professor thinks it's amazing. Do you care? Do you not care? Like these are all kinds of things that could be seen as success markers to someone, are legitimately success markers to some people, but may or may not matter to you. And once you decide that, this is the thing that, like Ree's thing from earlier of leaving this program and then feeling terrible. Like, what if I left this? Like, once you get this all laid out and you're like, oh, money is actually not important to me for this project. It is an external success marker that people say means success, but I can see it's not important to me with this project. I don't need to make money from it. I kind of don't care, So if it comes, great, but if not, whatever. you've already decided that, you know that clearly for yourself. So when it starts not making money, you can go back and say, and like, oh my God, it's not making money. You go, wait a second. I said it was fine that it does not make money. You know, look at what I said about this. Look at how I decided this. Here's how I decided this. Here's why I decided this. When you have that backup, when you have that evidence for yourself, it helps you reinforce your sense of security with the decisions you're making. And then that helps you actually follow through on them and act on them and not question them, you know, not second guess them, because it's going to get hard and it's going to get boring and things are going to happen that don't go the way you want. You know, you need to be able to go back to your reasoning and say, like, okay, this is the right decision and this is why. You also can go back and say, like, oh, this project is going in a way that I totally didn't expect and is now not aligned with my success criteria. And therefore, I'm going to quit. And I'm going to quit proactively. I'm going to quit now because I don't want to put more time into this thing because it's not aligned with what I want out of my life. And when you know that, you can ride that wave of like FOMO and doubt and whatever and say, like, it's cool, it's fine. I know it's true. You know, deep breath, it's going to be fine. Because we have so many, you know, the sunk cost fallacy is one part of that, but it's also like so many cultural, you know, prohibitions around quitting, you know, that it's like bad to quit, that you're weak if you quit, that there's, you know, something problematic about you if you quit. I disagree. I think the strongest thing you can possibly do is quit something you should quit. Like quit it early, quit it fast, quit it hard. Because like the worst thing you can be doing is pouring a whole bunch of time into something that it does not align with what you want out of your life. So that's where I'm looking at. That's the position I'm taking on criteria is that like this is what helps you verify, you know, what you need out of something. Oh, and the question of shame, yes. So there's so much shame around projects and doing them and not doing them and quitting them and starting them, whatever. There's so much of that stuff. And a huge amount of it comes out of, like I was saying earlier, this kind of sense of like, I thought of it, therefore it should be possible, or people say it should be possible and therefore it should be possible, or, you know, this system says if I use the system, it will be possible and doable, and I'm going to be able to do it and it's all going to be fine. And anytime we're not following through on something, we've got some kind of sense that there's like both internal and external expectations that the thing should happen. When it doesn't happen, that triggers a shame response. I'm not up to it. I'm not good enough, that there's something wrong with me because everybody says this should be doable and it's not doable. Why is it not doable? It's me. I'm the problem. And I want to point you to Brene Brown's work on shame. She's excellent on all this. Yeah. And there's a very key distinction that she makes that I love, which is between guilt and shame. That guilt is feeling bad about not having done a thing and is a useful, painful, but useful emotion. Because when you feel guilt, you can say like, okay, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again. I'm going to put things in place to make sure it doesn't happen because, you know, that was a mistake. And I wish I had not done that or had done that or whatever it is, right? Shame is I'm a bad person. There's something broken about me. Like it's like inherent to me. There's something the matter with me. And I don't deserve, you know, love or appreciation or whatever as a result of that. There's like very different, like the action is bad versus I am bad. And there's nothing, it's completely understandable. No shame about having shame because we all have it. But like there's nothing useful about shame in our current context. I think it evolved probably because there was such a need for group cohesion as we evolved as, you know, biological beings, that having a shame function to like excommunicate people who weren't following the rules might have had a survival, you know, function. That's just my like pseudoscientific thoughts about this. I mean, I think there's probably reasons why it's so strong, right? Because it's a social function of like keeping you in line, keeping you doing, you know, like towing the line, doing the thing. And we as advanced, you know, humans have set up all these systems around productivity, which is like so much shame around not doing more work, not doing more stuff, just not completing things, not being like a contributing member to your family or to society or to whatever. And so much that comes out of like the Puritan work ethic. And I mean, I could go on and on. Like it's a mess. It's a mess. So if you feel it, very understandable. I feel it too. It's a normal thing. But I think, again, identifying like, oh, I'm having a shame reaction to this. And trying to get a little objectivity from it, talking to somebody who's a safe person to talk to about this feeling, just saying you have it, that you're having this feeling can be really helpful in unwinding the feeling. And just recognizing that there are certain triggers that have been, implanted in you genetically and also societally that will trigger this kind of reaction. And it's just going to happen. And you have to figure out how to negotiate that. Any other comments before I move on? Just one more little bit here. So the third C is commitments. And the commitments piece, as I teach it in the Creative Focus workshop, is primarily a list of your ideas, like all the ideas, the things you want to be working on in a given domain. And one thing that's come up frequently already in this group is, yeah, but I have like these ideas in this domain and these ideas in this domain. How do I decide between those things? And that's also a question, right? To look at what is your criteria for like where you want to be spending your time. So again, it's sort of like at a meta level, like how much time do I want to be spending on this area versus this area? That's a different kind of decision making. But the list of ideas of like, these are the things I want to be doing within this domain helps you then put those into a prioritization matrix and figure out what rises to the top. And that's what we're going to do next in the decide phase. One of the biggest problems I see with people coming into my world is all the ideas, all the things. And again, feeling like because you had the idea, they need to happen. And one of the biggest things that I want people to walk away with is the ability to permanently say goodbye to certain ideas. Things that either just don't serve you, they're just not going to be helpful. Things that belong to a different version of yourself that is a past version that's no longer relevant. And, with great respect and love, you can sunset these ideas and say, like, this was a fantastic idea for when I was 25, but it's not relevant to me right now. It's no longer going to be something that I want to be doing with my life. And a lot of times, and I have these too, like these are ideas, I have ideas that I've been holding on to for 25 years or, 20 years or something like that. Do I work on them? No, but they're still there. Like there's a few things where I'm like, maybe, and for the most part, it's not an active wait for me because I don't pay any attention to them. One of the things I wanted to talk about is the green room, which we're going to get to in the future, like taking these ideas, and we're going to get to that once we do the prioritization. Ideas you're not working on and put them in a waiting room, put them somewhere where you're not looking at them. And my green room for ideas, it's called Green Room, and it's a table, it's like a database with like ideas, and I can put notes in it and whatever. Once they're there, I almost don't ever have to think about them. I will look at them if I need, like, where was that thing? And I'll go find it and it's there, or once a quarter or once a year, I'll be like, do I want to do any of these things? And I'll look at them and see. But putting them someplace like that and having made the decision that this is not what I'm doing now, it's not what I'm doing in the near future, makes it so much easier to not have them on my mind because there's so much cognitive weight to carrying these things around and feeling like, yeah, but this, yeah, but that, yeah, but this, yeah, but that. Those are, it's a lot more weight than we give it credit for. And that's what I want to encourage everybody to be aware of and thinking about here. The deeper dives for the collect phase are time tracking, which I've already recommended to a few people. And to be clear, the time tracking that we're talking about here is a very specific kind of time tracking where there's lay out a basic plan for your day and then do your day and figure out what the differences are so that it's starting to highlight areas where you think something's happening and it's not, or you think something's not happening and it is. And it's really useful. Highly recommended for everybody, but also like if you're particularly like, how do I fit this into my day or what's happening with my time or whatever, you can add, like Garima, you're talking about your energy at various times of the day. You could add a layer, like add a column or something, which is your energy. Like where do I feel creative? Where do I feel energetic? Where do I feel tapped out and I need a nap? Like you can definitely do that kind of tracking alongside this and it can also be extremely useful. It's not part of the lesson, but it's a great thing to do. And then there are 3 deeper dives that are related to criteria, especially if you're struggling to figure out what your criteria are. One of them is the creative conditions, which I already mentioned. One of them is values, which is very similar to other values exercises you will have done potentially in a business program or whatever. I'm just getting you to take a little more time over it and kind of ruminate, think about it over time and like assess it. There's also a blog post that's related to this that I did not put into the course because I didn't want to make anybody feel like they needed to do it if it's not for them, which is about operationalizing your values. How do you take these values and put them into action in your life? And the example I gave of this earlier in the lesson brief was one of my values, one of my core business values is objectivity. And so you can already see today how objectivity has a huge influence on how I'm teaching. It also has a huge influence on how I collect data, about what works and what doesn't work for people, how I talk about what we do, the sort of my voice and the things that I talk about in my marketing and so on. So that's the idea of operationalizing values. It's there if you want it. You definitely can just put a pin in this and do it some other time. But it is because it takes time. That's why I didn't put it into the course because I didn't want to make it like this big, heavy thing for people, but it's available if you want it. And then the other criteria related things is vision charting. We kind of touched on that a little bit, like thinking about your 5-year vision. And again, very important that this is not a plan. It is not a 5-year strategic plan and you're going to do all these things and God damn it, you're going to get through it all and it's all going to happen for sure. This is how do I hope I am living? How do I want to be living in 5 years? And then how do I need to be adjusting what I'm doing now in order to kind of go in that direction? What do I want in my life in 5 years? And so how can I start building the structure for that now? Knowing that as soon as you start building it, you're going to learn things and you may change your mind, and that's completely fine. And then the final thing here has to do with commitments, which is open loops. And so if you are somebody who has just like so much stuff around, like all these things, and you're constantly like, oh my God, this, oh my God, that, open loops is a super useful activity for culling through all that stuff and sorting out what have you committed to, usually unconsciously, like you're not like, I have this letter I have to return to like Social Security for my mom. And it's like, I keep forgetting about it and I have to do it. And that means I have to go to a neighbor and get him to sign as a witness. And there's like it's a mini project. I'm like, ugh, so I have to like get it out where I can see it and put it on a list, or it just always bites me in the ass. I go downstairs and see the letter and I'm like, that thing again, right? So that's an open loop, right? So open loops can be big, they can be small, but if you're finding yourself constantly like, oh, wait, that thing, oh my God, it's a really good exercise to do to kind of get all those things visible to you. Also, if your space happens to be super duper messy, and that's driving you crazy, if it doesn't drive you crazy, that's fine. But if it's driving you crazy, it's a methodology for going through it in a very orderly way to like bit by bit figure out what's going on there and decide what to do with stuff. Okay, that's my spiel. Any other comments or questions about the other parts of the collect phase? Yeah.
So when I did the collect phase, so I had started a blog 7 years ago, and it did really well for a while, but then I dropped the ball on it.
Mhm.
And I just keep, I mean, you're right, like, sunk cost, but I was also going to say, going back into when you start something, actually, people told me you shouldn't be starting a cooking blog. You are an analyst, you are a business person. I mean, you don't fit into that identity. So I started anyways. But what I learned from doing that is that there's some, we have all these creative impulses, and that blog really, worked as a creative outlet. But then I think at this point I've outgrown, but I still have lot of projects that I associate with that blog. But when I chose this project of, coaching, women over 40, I realized it has actually immediate um, kind of like benefits to them and to me as well.
Mhm.
Um, so I think when you're talking about open loops, I do feel like I do have a lot of open loops connected to my blog still. And what would be the most effective way to sort of like drop the projects that you think you have in your mind?
Well, so
But
this is, yeah, those projects you're talking about having to do with your blog, they belong in your commitments, your idea inventory. Put those
right,
things in there because when you have a blog, you're constantly having ideas. Oh, this post, that post, this thing,
right,
this
right. I
post, blah,
do
blah, blah,
have that list, but
all
I'm
the
still
lists.
like
But
in my mind.
now, next, we're going to
Mhm.
go through the prioritization matrix and you're going to decide not to do those things. Then to sunset those things, you're going to either delete them and be like, it never existed, or you're going to put them into a project screen room, either under like, I am going to consider this within the next 6 months. I might consider this at some point in the next couple of years, or this is just a thing I thought of one time and I don't want to forget about it. So I'm putting it on an archive list. And those are the kind of the levels there. But you need to be making the point here is to make a very conscious decision not to do these projects because right now you're like, I'm probably not going to do these things, but I don't know, and they keep coming back. So you have
Yes.
to like put them someplace saying like, I have decided this. This is why I decided this, so that then you're able to remind yourself because for a while they're going to keep popping up, but after a while they won't. Like at first they'll be like, but this, but that. And you're like, no, 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 it's on the list. I know, fine, and then gradually your brain will get used to the new reality and it'll calm down. But it doesn't happen like, on a dime.
Right. Okay. So I just need to just keep putting them off. That's the thing, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, keep putting them off, but very clearly say, I am not doing this. This is a no. I am not doing this. I'm either not doing this now or I'm never doing this.
okay.
And that's the key is not to just like, oh, yeah, I'll deal with it later. Don't do that. Make the decision and very
Right.
clearly assign this to a category of like never, or at least, I'm not even going to look at this for a year. So where does it fit? Yeah, good. Other questions or comments? Okay. So those of you who have had road mapping calls with contingency plans, let's talk about those next time. So just think of one thing on your contingency plan that you want to bring up next time. Like one item, which is like, this might happen and here's what I'm going to do. And let's have a discussion about contingency plans. Next session is open session. So whatever questions you want to bring. Obviously, every session is an open session to a certain extent. But so next session does not have a curricular element. And then after that, we'll be doing the decide phase. Yeah, for those of you who have not yet scheduled your road mapping call, I encourage you to do the onboarding form and it shouldn't take too long. And as soon as you do that, the thank you page gives you the link to schedule. And that's the way to get to the next step. So it's been really great to meet with everybody individually and lay out some very specific goals, which is great. And the rest of you, I will do that very soon. Okay, any other things? There's something here. Elizabeth, what were you looking for?
Well, I got a little confused about what you said, the clutter methodology, and then
Yeah,
the
it's
answered.
open
But
loops.
I'm a little confused also about the green rooms because I did do a sheet about green room, and then you mentioned green room in another
Yeah, so there's two green rooms.
context. Okay.
There's a tasks green room, which is just like daily stuff and like, oh my God, the giant list of blah, 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 all the things, right? And then there's a projects green room, which comes up when it isn't yet. You haven't seen the lesson yet, unless you're already in decide phase. That comes up in the saying no lesson. So basically we have the 3 collect lessons, which we talked about today. The 3 decide lessons are the prioritization matrix, which is the methodology for making these big decisions. Then saying no. How do you say no? What are you committed to? What is the one thing you are going to do? What are you not going to do? And that's where the green room comes up. And then the third decide lesson is pre-deciding. So that's habits, templates, and so on. like making decisions that are category decisions for how you want to be doing stuff regularly. Those are the 3 decide lessons. That's what's coming next. So for now, if you have these things and you want to put them somewhere, just make a document, call it green room, put a list. You'll have it there when you need it, whatever. The other thing we were talking about is the open loops lesson, which is in a deeper dive. So I did not put some of these lessons directly into the curriculum. The deeper dives, the idea with these is like, you go to them when you need them. You don't need them, don't worry about them. I'm trying to make the actual core lessons short, very useful, simple, but also then offer you the opportunity to continue going deeper, doing more if you want to. But, the most important thing we're doing here is your own work, so I don't want to get you too tied up in finishing stuff for the Creative Focus workshop. I was listening to a podcast episode the other day, and the woman was like talking about different styles of coaching, and she was calling them different names. I forget what they all were, but basically she's like, my way is to just constantly be throwing more stuff at people. I have like 5 coaching sessions a week and all this new curriculum coming up and challenges and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, how does anybody do anything in your group? How does anybody actually finish anything when you're constantly teaching them new things and learning new things, And I identified my style as like, try to get it boiled down to a thing and stick to the thing. Like that's it, There's always more layers to this. This is a very iterative process in all kinds of ways. So we started off this whole session talking about just do it, right? Just try something, just go. And that's exactly how I want you to treat what we're doing with the Creative Focus workshop as well. Just do it. Just do some. It doesn't matter if you do it perfectly. It doesn't matter if you do it all. Anything you do will contribute towards learning more about yourself and how these things are going to help you. And you can always come back to it. And everything's interconnected. And so it's going to constantly be like, oh, I'm in, module 16. Not, there aren't 16, but anyway, like module 8. And now module 2 is relevant again, right? So you'll see how things are all interconnected. So you don't have to worry about perfection because there's no such thing. Great. Okay. Awesome to see you all. Thanks for being here. And Ree, I will see you later on. Yep. Okay. Bye, everybody.